street, but since then I've made my home here in Merri-bek. I love our progressive, creative and diverse community. There's so many great places to visit. There's always something new to learn, something new to see, or something to do. In 2018, our council declared a climate emergency. The reality is that the climate crisis demands we reshape our cities to deal with the impacts of rising heat and more extreme weather events like flooding. But there's also opportunity. Imagine if we use this chance to make our streets greener, cooler and more livable and safe for everyone to get around in, no matter if you're walking, riding or driving. There's a lot of work for us to do together and I'm really excited about the next 12 months. So please get in touch with your ideas and I look forward to meeting you out in our community. We got it? Good.
Open Streets trials are initiatives to open the streets to people walking, riding, scooting and close the streets to car traffic just to drop off and pick up times. We know that a lot of schools in Merri-bek really struggle with congestion. We also know that a lot of families want to walk or ride to school, but the dangerous zones outside the school gates often push people away from making that choice. So it's really about just creating a really hyper-safe, sustainable, healthy space in front of schools.
It's been absolutely brilliant. The kids are loving coming to school on Tuesdays. There's a real vibe and a sense of, joy when we start the day together. Lots of families are starting to come back. Our student attendance has increased on the days that we have open streets, and also we have less lateness as well. So it's just been brilliant all around.
We don't normally walk, we normally drive, so it's a really good incentive to get parents that don't normally do it, doing it. Once we're out and walking, they really enjoy it. It's so much safer. The kids love coming in here, playing, drawing with chalk.
This has been probably the highlight. Parents are saying, wow, can we do this more often, which has been fantastic. To see the joy on the kids' faces and to hear them saying, wanting to ride their bikes and wanting to have a play on the street's been amazing.
We have a huge percentage of our students riding to school. You can just see how successful it is. We've got kids riding, parents coming along, just really enjoying themselves. And it's changed my thinking. For someone who drove to work, bought my own bike and riding to work each day, it's amazing.
It's a fun experience. I normally walk, but today everyone's doing it, so I might as well join in.
It's also an initiative that residents and the local community can take part in. We want to see people coming out, having a coffee, we want to see people talking to their neighbours, and it's been really fantastic to partner with Bicycle Network and the schools to run these initiatives and really see, some healthy, happy street space.
Being part of Open Streets has been really exciting. We're interested in making people view their neighbourhood streets in a different way, being spaces for everyone and multi-use spaces, not just for throughways for cars.
You just listen to all this noise. It's great having everyone have so much fun around you and just being active. No, we're really stoked. We should have it every day.
This is very attractive for parents and kids to spend together. I think it's encouraging people to ride to the school.
I think it's definitely a good idea to get people active and getting people involved with the community. Because of this, it got a lot of me and my friends to ride to school every day. I get to see all my friends and talk to new people.
I'm Maya, and I've been really into boxing and I do a lot of art in my spare time, and I'm also a disability support worker. I was officially diagnosed with chronic fatigue probably about 2 years ago. I have a specialist doctor and I was telling him I really need a label for this. And the reason he said that he didn't want to give me the label sooner was because he knew how it was perceived in the medical field as like being a bit of a joke, and that it actually is more detrimental to me to have the label than not to have it. And it's better to go to the doctors saying that you have adrenal fatigue or something a little bit fancier just to be taken a little bit more seriously. It's hard to have this sort of condition because everyone knows what fatigue is like, so everyone can jump in and sort of add their anecdotes, and I think it takes away from what it really is like. When people show a genuine interest and it's not sort of clouded by their own experience, or I know what it's like being tired all the time, it's actually just really helped when people are like, what is that actually like? That gives me the opportunity to be like, it's so much more than people think. It's not just being tired throughout the day or needing a coffee. It's, you know, having 10 hours of full sleep and not being rested. It's not being able to get up in the morning. It's being late to shifts because you just can't move your body. You know, it's really hard to be 22 with a chronic condition that makes me feel like the energy of an 80-year-old, or having to come home at 10 o'clock at night when it's a Saturday night, you know, that sort of thing. So I think it just really helps when people ask questions, because it makes me feel seen. It makes me feel like people are actually interested, instead of making the assumption that, oh, I know what it's like, I can deal with it, why can't she? People with disabilities, they have so much to bring to the table, but I guess the table isn't always accessible to them, so to speak. I guess that's like the most important thing, is to give them a platform, especially, you know, working with disabled people and advocating for them. You realise like how hard it is for them to even have that voice in the first place. I see how much they struggle to get the support they need and to have their voice heard and to just get their basic needs met. That already gives you sort of an idea of how hard it must be for other people with invisible disabilities to even just get disabled parking, or to have someone offer their seat to you on a train. I think that's really important, is the distinction between equality and equity. It's that equality is all great and good, but the reality is we're all very different. We all have different needs and abilities. It's okay for one person to need a little bit more external support than another person.
Well, they did putting the solar panel on top of the roof. It looks beautiful, and what is important is knowing the help that it could for us for our energy efficiency. I saw everyone here in our neighborhood is putting solar, so I said to myself, I will think about it. I will not lose anything, you know, so I choose to put it, and that makes a difference. It helps us when we receive the bill now. We saw the difference from the usual amount that we paid, so it went down. And I think, you know, it will help us, the money that is being not paid before, we can use it with other things. And I think the overall help of that solar being installed in our roof is really to save some money, and also helping the climate change. And it will really make a difference for the earth, you know. In a way, it is helping us. So I will recommend, don't hesitate to put this solar panel in your roof. It is a big difference to have it.
I'm here on behalf of the City of Moreland to start the official process of renaming our municipality. The Council received a letter from the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung said, retention of this name for the principal civic body for a diverse community is untenable. The Council agreed.
The language of this land is not lost, it's still looking for its people. And this is one big step actually to bring the voice of the land back by naming the local language area. Language connects us to culture. It's how we learn everything, how we express everything. Now let's use all the wisdom, resources, capacity, knowledge, history to learn from the past and never let it happen again, and move forward and help the people that need it the most.
Pedestrians and bike riders, including a large and growing number of Coburg High School students, are at risk every day on and around Coburg's Bell Street Bridge at the Nicholson and Elizabeth Street intersection.
The area is notorious for traffic accidents. Recently, a Coburg High School student was injured by a car while walking in the area.
Footpaths on the Bell Street Bridge are significantly narrower than other bridges in the area, yet the Bell Street Bridge carries more traffic than almost any other road in Merri-bek, 47,000 vehicles a day. The narrow paths, along with high volumes of cars, trucks and buses, pose an unacceptable risk to safety and accessibility in our communities.
We know that more than 1,000 people walk and wheel across the bridge on weekdays, just in the morning and afternoon peak periods. Even more use the bridge during the day and on weekends. We also know that students are worried about walking and cycling across the bridge. And for many, it's their only way to and from school, or to access the after-school activities and shops.
I've heard lots of horror stories about near misses and things like that, but most of what I see is just less than a metre in between the pedestrians.
Okay. Members of the gallery, can you hear me? Welcome, our core crew. So, good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. In accordance with section 357, clause 5 of the governance rules, I now resume the council meeting that commenced at 7 p.m, 10th of April, 2024. I note that we are commencing at 6 p.m, 7 past 6 on the 11th of April, 2024 tonight. My name is Councillor Adam Pulford and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council and the chairperson of this council meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you back to this council meeting. I would just briefly like to acknowledge we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of these lands and waterways and pay our respects to their elders past and present. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Attendees are advised they'll be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we'll act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of everybody. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thanks everyone for your understanding and cooperation. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge councillors in attendance in person. So we have Councillor Oscar Yildiz.
Hello, everyone.
And Councillor Sue Bolton is on her way in, so we should see her in person soon. The following councillors have been approved to attend tonight's meeting online. We have the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening.
We have Councillor Angelica Panopoulos.
Evening.
Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening.
And Councillor Mark Riley.
Hi all.
We have an apology for tonight's meeting from Councillor James Conlon. And I'd also like to acknowledge that both Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon and Councillor Monica Hart are on approved leaves of absence. Here we have our Chief Executive Officer, Kathy Henderson, and we have representatives of the Council Executive and our governance team as well. So as this is a continuation of last night's meeting, we'll start at the point of debating the amendment moved by Councillor Tapanos and seconded by Councillor Pavlidis, who we expect to join us online shortly. On item 7.12, the proposed councillor contact with lobbyists, developers and submitters policy. I remind councillors that as the mover, Councillor Tapanos, has spoken to the amendment, as mover, Councillor Tapanos has spoken to the amendment, and the seconder, Councillor Pavlidis, had reserved her right to speak. So we are debating the amendment. We'd had a number of questions on it last night, but would any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? Councillors are online, can you see the amendment on the screen? No, we might get that, make sure.
Yes,
you
up
can.
now.
You can? Great, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it could be enlarged for my purposes, Adam. I can't, it's a bit hard for me to read. That sizing.
Thanks. Councillor Riley, your audio is a little bit choppy. I'm not sure if there's a headset you might be able to use that could clear it up, but just so you know, can be a bit hard to understand. Yes, thanks, Councillor Riley. So we're on this amendment. You should be able to see it projected. We have heard from the mover. The seconder has reserved their right. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Riley. Yeah, sorry, I think he's just getting his audio connected. So
Just going to use the audio without that. Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's actually a bit better. Maybe just if you speak a little bit, yeah, if you speak at that volume, I think that's easier for us.
Look, my comments are around the, I'm just getting my notes up here, around the fact that this officer recommendation is established on principles of good conduct. It's about councils displaying the highest legal and ethical standards. It's about reducing the risks associated with our planning matters and assessments particularly, but also ensuring transparency and accessibility to the public and our residents. It's really important to acknowledge that in this policy, the councillors are not to be offering advice around planning matters particularly, and that they need to be referring those to officers and seeking or suggesting they get professional advice. It's also about ensuring that councillors don't declare their positions prior to a planning matter particularly.
So, Councillor Riley, sorry, we're debating the amendment that's on the screen. You're just...
Yep, and I just want to sort of
make
no
that
worries. Point. So
continue.
I'm getting to the point that the submitters that councillor that the motion, this amendment is addressing, submitters need to be in terms of the way the policy is framed, they can be registering interactions with submitters only needs to be around those instances involving concerns about inappropriate behaviour. It's about conflicts of interests where that might be occurring with submitters and about undue influence. So the policy does address submitters already. It's not requiring that every interaction with submitters be logged and addressed. It's putting the onus on people who maybe submitting applications, particularly where I think mainly this policy is addressing in particular planning matters, and so where they are applying to have their land developed for multi-unit developments, or multi-unit dwellings, or for commercial purposes, we're putting the emphasis on those larger, bigger developments, and ensuring that the requirements around those and the interactions around those are streamlined and easy for councillors to do, as easy as possible, but also making sure the community can follow that and get access to it. So I just want to underscore that this policy has been drafted in a way to provide guidance for us. And in fact, all citizens and councillors should look at the guidance on page 1036 of the agenda. I won't read it here because it's too long, but that covers off on many practical and useful things we need to be doing when we're interacting. So this amendment for me is trying to further complicate what we're trying to keep is a relatively simple step. If this needs to be improved and changed over time, then councillors can ask for that to happen. It's a policy we can adjust at whatever time we need to. I think that this is an overstep, and it's actually trying to confuse people when in fact it should be kept relatively simple and streamlined and straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this amendment? We may move on. Sorry, Councillor Tapanos, would you like to exercise?
Right, a reply just briefly. Thank you for the debate, councillors. I heard the comments with interest. I just wanted to emphasise that the highest standard of accountability would be to include submitters. I understand it might be more of an administrative burden, but that's what it is. It's just an administrative burden that we have to log more interactions. But from an accountability perspective, the highest standard will be to include submitters. Submitters are not always just residents who are abutting, who have put in submissions, but they are people that might be submitting in favour of large developments. They are organisations that might be submitting that have a policy interest in this area. They might be future residents who have purchased off the plan and submitting in favour of development. I think what you'll see is that if we start treating developers, lobbyists, separate from other people who are trying to influence us, i.e., submitters, you might find that people change their tactics, and we see more developers getting others to put in submissions. A practice that's occurred, a practice that Operation Sandon warned about. So to keep it consistent and to keep it to the highest quality um, of accountability and openness, submitters should be included. Now, I understand that that is an administrative burden, an additional administrative burden, but so be it. We will get used to it. We will streamline that administrative process, and we'll be able to record these interactions. I don't expect that we would record the name and address of everyone we meet, but when it comes to submitters, I think it would be suffice to say I met with submitters, I met with the person who contacted me and other submitters if required. So I think we will be lenient towards the administrative aspects, but it's better to include it. It's better to have some
Thank you, Councillor
declaration.
Tapanos.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to voting on this amendment. All councillors in favour of this amendment? All those against? Yes. You're supportive? Okay, all right. So sorry, let's just redo that vote. And I suspect there'll be a division called, so I might just do that now. So we'll call a division. So all those in favour? So Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Tapanos. All those against? Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos, Councillor Riley and Councillor Pulford. I declare that amendment lost. We now return to the motion as a whole. On the substantive motion, Councillor Riley as the mover has spoken. Councillor Panopoulos as the seconder has reserved her right, and we haven't had any further speakers. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Okay, we might move on to voting. Oh, sorry, I don't think anyone's opposed this, so there's no right of reply. So we'll move on to voting. All those in favour of this? I can see that's unanimous, so I might declare that unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 7.13, Brunswick Mechanics Institute Management Model. Councillor Riley, are you hoping to move?
Yeah, I just want to call for any conflicts and then I'll move it.
Sorry, yes. Are there any conflicts of interest to disclose? Okay, Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor.
So you want? Which do you want to move?
I want to move the officer recommendation.
Yeah, and do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos and Mayor. Look, this is an exciting opportunity for us to renew our contract on this really important institution on the corner of Brunswick and Glen Lyon Roads in Brunswick. It's in the Arts and Culture Precinct that we're developing. It's in the design district that the Victorian State Government's promoting around the RMIT campus and into this Arts and Culture district. It's really significant with the Saxon Street redevelopment occurring. It sort of has a lot of opportunities that will be coming our way as a community of artists and creatives and imbibers of such things. So it's an exciting time to be renewing this contract. I personally have had some concerns around the presentation of the building and the access and so on, which I've been addressing with officers. But I'm really confident that the reframing of the new agreement with the potential managers of the site is going to actually enhance the sort of local involvement in the site. It's really important to acknowledge that the Mechanics Institute does have a lot of limitations. It doesn't have a green room, for example, for artists to be able to sit and set up and relax and so on in between performances and so on. It doesn't have a backstage, which is really restricting the kinds of productions and the kinds of performances and work that can go on there. So there's enormous restrictions on this building because it kind of appears to be this small but really wonderful theatre, which it has those aspects, but it got some major restrictions on it. So does limit what can happen there and how it can happen and so on. And I think our long-term plan as a council will be to try and see if we can improve those facilities to have a wider range of works. But it also allows people to perform in the open space around the building. We've got an award for the design, the public urban design space there. That's really important. And this contract that we're putting a request out to our community to have people operate it is important because they'll be bringing in artists and bringing in creatives into our city. If we were to run this, as the officer report makes it really clear, it would be 2 or 3 times the cost of running it. So, I know that some people are uncomfortable about outsourcing, but a good outsource program can actually provide a win-win for the organisation, but also for the community. So I'm really pleased to be able to move this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos, the seconder.
So nothing further to add from me.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Yeah.
Through you, Mayor, just apologies. There was an incorrect version of the officer recommendation on the screen for a moment there, but Councillor Riley made clear that he was moving the officer recommendation. What's on the screen now is the correct officer recommendation.
Great. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move on to voting. So all those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. And welcome, Councillor Bolton. We're now moving on to item 7.14, the 2023-24 third quarter financial report. Do I have somebody to move a motion? Councillor Riley. And just checking what you'd like to move, Councillor Riley?
I'm checking the officer report and I don't have a conflict of interest on this.
Yeah.
So I'd like to remove the officer recommendation if I have a
Yeah, sure. And Councillor Eudes is happy to second. So Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Look, this is a regular report, a monthly report. It's a really important one about our finances. And given we just put out our draft budget tonight, it's great to see that we have a surplus or an underlying surplus that we're hoping to produce by the end of the financial year. We've still got a couple of months to go, but the predictions are looking very good. There is a list of carry forwards in our capital works program. For different reasons, we need to do that. It's a long list, but it's really important that we're spending money on the capital in our city and making sure we're upgrading it. And sometimes we need to juggle that around. So we're putting a lot of that off into the next financial year, but it's really important that people see that. But again, I'll say this month after month when I managed to remove this report that we are showing green lights on all of the indicators as far as my last reading of this was. And I think that's not just on the immediate monthly report, but that's the long-term indicators, which is a credit to us as a council. It demonstrates our fiduciary and prudent way of working, and that we're managing our residents' rates in a really, efficient way and careful way, because there are huge pressures on us with the enormous increases in capital works and concrete construction and building, and we've really experienced that. So it's to our credit that we continue to do this. Kind of boggles my mind how we actually keep doing it, but somehow we keep managing it well. So it's a credit to the officers and to everyone involved. So I'm happy to move this.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. So yes, we've got Councillor Bolton who's joining us in person, and Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Pavlidis, could we just see if your mic's working?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Great, we can hear you. Yes, perfect. So
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Where are we up to?
Yes, sorry. We're just... Councillor Riley has just spoken as the mover to 7.14, the third quarter financial report, and up to Councillor Eudes as seconder if you'd like to... No, Councillor Eudes reserves his right to debate. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? We might move on to a vote for this item. All those in favour? And I can see that that's carried unanimously, so I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 7.15, the Governance Report, April 2024, the cyclical report. Do any councillors have a conflict of interest to disclose? Would any councillors like to move an item or move a motion?
Through you, Mayor, I have a question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you. I see, apologies for arriving late. I see item 7, we are reappointing a member to the Audit and Risk Committee, which is fine or well. But I do have a question because the Charter states that no member can be appointed or reappointed for more than a maximum of 2 terms, which is 6 years. However, we reappointed the chair, I think last March, and he was first appointed in 2017, reappointed again in 2020, and then again in 23, which brings it up to 9 years. Can I get a response as to why that would be the case when it clearly states only a maximum of 2 terms, 6 years?
Councillor Pavlidis, I'll just refer to the Director of Business Transformation, Sue Vucevic.
Through the Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Pavlidis, for your question. We did discuss that at the time, and the reappointment for the chair was undertaken under a new charter, so under a new act, so that's why that was able to occur at that point in time.
So further question of clarification. Based on previous appointments or reappointments, the consistent format of the report is, say, it reads as to when they were appointed first. Our charter doesn't say that based on a new act, the old one no longer exists. So I just wanted to get clarification as to legally, does that, because even in the annual report that the chair wrote, it does state that he started in 2017. So just for a bit of clarification and consistency, that's all.
So through the Mayor, thank you. Just for further clarification, it's a whole new committee under the Act that is established under the Act.
Councillor Riley, do you have a question?
No, I'm happy to move the matter so we can get to the point of the report, please.
Okay, so Councillor Riley's happy to move that's the officer recommendation?
Nathan, yeah.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, this is a regular governance report that we have, and it brings together lots of various matters and issues into one report. So we're kind of just neatening up the agenda. Reports on our advisory and reference committees. There's 3 there in this report. Importantly, the minutes of the notes on the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee, which we've just been talking about, and excuse me, also the biannual report from that committee. Importantly, our risk review, which is really important in our governance role to make sure that we're minimising risk and identifying high, medium and low risk and how prepared we are to be able to manage those should they arise. And it also addresses the public question time, those questions that haven't been able to be answered in the meeting, as was earlier discussed last night, early in the meeting when we had a query, one of the questions about why that wasn't published, and we got some clarity there. So finally, we're just recommending here to appoint Jeff Rigby as the independent member who's been who's been one term on the Audit and Risk Committee. So I'm happy to, having worked on that committee for a number of years, I'm happy to move this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Panopoulos.
Nothing further to add.
Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Might move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can see that's carried unanimously, so I'll declare that carried unanimously. We'll now move on to notices of motion, and last night we dealt with item 8.1, so we'll move on to item 8.2, support for emergency food and material aid relief, and that's moved by Councillor Sue Bolton. Councillor Bolton, is there a seconder for Councillor Bolton's notice of motion? I'm happy to second it. So go ahead, Councillor Bolton.
So my motion is about Council providing more support for emergency food and material aid relief. And I know staff have been contacting organisations to try and find out what's provided, but it is evident that some of the organisations that used to provide emergency food relief don't provide it anymore. And some organisations which, you know, are quite well funded actually direct a lot of people, don't provide as much aid, groups like Salvos, and some of the funded organisations like AIMS and Salvos and so forth direct or recommend that people use the services of unfunded groups like Muslim Women's Council of Victoria and Nourishing Neighbours. And I'm very aware of some of the stresses that those two organisations feel because they're, you know, both entirely volunteer groups. Their services expanded, but they're not funded by any level of government. And the biggest thing that they struggle with is a stable venue that they can use, which is fit to the purpose to be able to provide their service. And in the beginning, when we started our food system strategy, emergency sort of food relief was left out of the strategy in the very beginning. But now there is, you know, a possibility of sort of trying to integrate that a little bit in some form with a food system strategy. So my motion is really just recognising that we're in a cost of living crisis. It doesn't look like it's going to lift anytime soon. The housing crisis is just like it's almost getting towards what it was in the 1930s. And so I think councils are going to have to look at support. Now, a lot of councils, including Dandenong Council and the Western councils, did provide a lot of support for food relief and so forth during COVID. I know council officers are sort of contacting councils to find out the information now, but my motion is to find out exactly what is offered by other councils, etc. I have been told that some of the Western councils offer more than Merri-bek, but that might not be true, or might have been temporary. But one of the proposals I've got in the notice of motion is for a report to come back to council recommending a process by which council can begin the process of acquiring land or finding a way of developing a purpose-built facility which includes a commercial standard kitchen for unfunded emergency food and material relief organisations. Now, obviously, you know, this is just calling for a report to get recommendations to see what we can do. But I think this is what's needed, and it would obviously need to be, groups would need to work together and also to include this area of emergency food and material aid in the food system strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll just speak briefly as seconder. Agree with what Councillor Bolton has put forward and said. We are in a cost of living crisis and that housing and rental crises continue to escalate and people are under so much pressure to be able to make ends meet. And there are some incredible volunteers in our community who've stepped up and are helping people to feed themselves and their families when they're struggling to buy food as well as pay for rent or their mortgage or the bills in general. In our budget, we have allocated $50,000 to support CIS Merri-bek, which is one of the organisations providing food and emergency relief, and I'm really proud that council is providing that funding, and that came after CIS Merri-bek approached council talking about their experience working with our community and the pressures that they're under to be able to continue operating. But I'm also keen for council to look at whether there's ways we can get more space for community organisations, particularly ones that provide this kind of support for community members. We do own a lot of land in central Coburg, and so one of my thoughts at the moment is we won't necessarily need to acquire more land, but we can look at that. But rather, when we redevelop central Coburg, is there a possibility to include space for community organisations like these groups so that they can have a secure base to work out of and help community members? But that's also a long time coming. I appreciate the efforts of officers to, when we have got space, to reach out to the groups that need to find a longer, or at least a home for the short term, and support them in applying for through the expressions of interest processes that we run. So yeah, thanks to Councillor Bolton for moving this, and happy to second it, and hope councillors vote for it.
Question.
Go ahead.
So a figure of $50,000 was just, did you just mention that?
I mentioned that it's in the draft budget.
Okay. I don't have an issue with this. The only problem is this going to be precedent where we've got a number of other groups that could potentially approach us, but they're going to go through the correct process, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. So
it's not just a matter of us moving a...
Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead, Councillor Bolton.
My motion, the motion itself doesn't mention any organisation. It just mentions unfunded organisations which are providing this service. So obviously, if council did create a facility, it would have to be, like, groups would have to work together or whatever. I mean, you can't, like, I mean, I've just mentioned in the background, there are 2 groups I'm aware of. There might be some others, but I actually have a feeling, I'm pretty sure that's not the case now. Those are the only 2 that are unfunded. And the group that council is putting some funding towards, CIS Merri-bek, I mean, they refer a lot of their clients to these 2 unfunded organisations. Yep. So, yeah, I'm not, preordaining that. Have to be some process by, working out what groups and so forth. One of the groups provides cooked meals and the other one doesn't. So, yeah.
I've got no issue with groups like this getting funding. It's just, I just don't want to make it a precedent where anyone can just come along, and as long as they're applying through the process, there's no issue.
Thanks, Councillor Udez. I'll take that as your contribution to the debate. Are there any other...
I also wanted to just echo the sentiments of Councillor Hilders there as well, that we do need to ensure that there is a competitive process in these matters, because there are a number of food relief organisations right across the country. And I'm not sure if I could ask the question of what was the process for the allocation to the organisation that we are funding?
So that was that went through the budget process. So we passed a motion at a previous meeting referring potential funding to CIS Merri-bek. We can chase up which meeting that was at, but it was at a meeting late last year. And then in the budget process, councillors chose to fund it.
Yeah, I just wanted to see whether there was a competitive process, or did council fund that organisation directly, or did it have a tender process or a competitive process?
So I'll refer that to the CEO.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So CIS Merri-bek, what they've been funded to do in the budget is actually to coordinate, streamline and promote assessment and service referrals, facilitate collaboration between food and relief agencies across Merri-bek, as well as collect data to help us better plan for what goes ahead. That's what that money is for. It came about through an approach to council, which council considered a meeting and referred to the budget process. What Councillor Bolton's motion here is about a different service, which is the direct provision of material relief and supporting agencies in that way. And the council report in June, if this is passed, will come back and report on process issues as well.
Thank you. Thank you to the CEO. Do any other councillors wish to contribute to this item?
There's one little bit. Can I just add one bit of information which might be useful?
Okay.
It's just one thing, which is in terms of state government allocation of money to emergency organisations, one thing that they don't fund is venues. And a lot of the food relief organisation, the thing that is hardest to get is venue. A lot of, food relief organisations that have networks where they can get food and so forth to distribute, and even other goods and so forth, and they're rushing around, trying to sort out a lot of the Gazan refugees at the moment, and the Afghan refugees who've been plonked in the Ibis Hotel in Faulkner.
Yeah.
But the state government, even for the organisation that does fund, not these two in Merri-bek, but others, they do not provide facilities. So that's why that would be the most useful thing for council to provide, not to fund other things, but a facility.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll consider that a bit of a right of reply, given there was some discussion and questions amongst councillors. So we'll move on to voting for this or against it. All those in favour? I can see that's carried unanimously, so I'll declare it carried unanimously. And we'll move on to item 8.3, support for speed limit reduction and school zones, from Councillor Panopoulos.
Thank you. And I'll just make sure that the right one is up on the screen, as there was an amended one circulated late yesterday afternoon that also included a bit around Elizabeth Street and also Mercy College.
Yeah, so governance are just getting that on the screen, and Councillor Bolton has expressed interest in seconding. I'll just let Councillor Bolton look at the amended one and confirm. So we had
I just can't see you, so let me know when I'm good.
Yeah, that's okay. It is up there, and I think Councillor Bolton's just reading through.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. So Councillor Bolton's happy to second. So Councillor Panopoulos.
Mayor, so as councillors, I'm sure we all know, we receive quite constant communication and requests for lowered speed limits and the introduction of expanded school zones across Merri-bek. A lot of the time, it's parents of school-aged children and teachers and principals who are getting in touch and who, I guess, detail all of the near misses or the accidents and traumatic experiences that they've had with themselves or their students getting to and from school. Now, we know that road safety is something that this council cares a lot about and is making a lot of efforts towards addressing. So that's, I guess, what this motion aims to do. There's, I guess, the way that you get these speed limit reductions is through the Department of Transport approving them. And so this motion, which I hope will succeed tonight, is about really bolstering the efforts of officers to get the department to take this seriously and to get them to address this in the speedy manner that it really does require. So this was brought about through conversations with parents and the principal at Pascoe Vale South, as well as conversations with folks from Coburg High and Mercy College who have raised the other issues. So we know that speeding and infrastructure is incredibly, or the lack of safe infrastructure makes a difference when it comes to people walking and riding to and from school. We know all the benefits of encouraging people to make their own way to and from school, and so this really is about helping the efforts of the officers in appealing to the department to be able to approve the reduced speed limits, as well as the advocacy pieces around Mercy College with, I guess, Sydney Road and the traffic there, because there have been some interventions, but it's not enough because people are still speeding in their cars, and the current crossing it just doesn't make sense the way that it is currently built to encourage school children to actually cross in a safe way. So, yeah, I really encourage, I guess, all councillors to support this motion tonight. It's a pretty straightforward one, but one that I think is very important for us to keep on our radar in terms of schools and children, and making it safe to get to and from school. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Bolton, a seconder.
Yes, I think this is a really important motion. The one bit that I thought had already been dealt with by council was the Pentridge Boulevard, because my understanding from when we had at the last meeting that was already being done. But anyway, I'm happy to vote for it again if it is already being done, because I think that whole Pentridge precinct near Coburg High needs to be 40 kilometres an hour, and that's what we were discussing at the last meeting, I thought. But I also totally agree with Councillor Panopoulos' inclusion of the two schools that where the entrance isn't directly on the main road but slightly off, but lots of school kids cross, i.e. Bell Street and near the Coburg High School entrance, because in reality, you know, huge numbers of people cross Bell Street at that time and Elizabeth Street, and it is a huge danger zone. And ditto Coonans Road, because while the entrance to the primary school is slightly off the Coonans Road, it's a small feeder street that feeds students straight onto Coonans Road, which is quite busy. And certainly Mercy College, like I've never ever seen a school kid cross there, ever, I don't think, in all my times of going past Mercy College, and I would never be game to cross the street there. Yeah, I certainly agree with all of these measures.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can see that's unanimous, so I declare that carried unanimously. On to the final notice of motion for tonight, 8.4, no to waste to energy incinerator in northern suburbs, from Councillor Sue Bolton. And so we'll need to get a seconder. I'm happy to second. Go ahead, Councillor Bolton.
So people, councillors would have heard John Englert, a Fawkner resident, also from Climate Action Moreland or Merri-bek, who made a contribution about the question of northern suburbs incinerator, Wollert having been included in the northern suburbs now, not being a country town anymore. And just not that many weeks ago, people were really shocked to hear that a waste-to-energy incinerator was being planned for Wollert. Wollert, which doesn't have a council at the moment, it's under administration, and the state government decided not to call for an environmental impact assessment, and so there has been some limited public consultation, but the community was caught on the hop. But there is, this does have the impact of these incinerators extends way beyond the immediate local area in terms of pollution, and as John Englert was talking about last night, of pollution travelling down the waterways, but also Merri-bek Council actually has a position in our waste strategy of opposing incinerators, this idea of waste-to-energy incinerators. It's incredibly toxic, potentially creating PFAS contamination and all sorts of contamination, but also greenhouse gases as well. It's not it's not an environment cost neutral technology whatsoever, and it will have an impact way beyond the area that it is located. the deadline for submissions is the 14th of April. So my motion was to for council to put put in a submission to the inquiry about the waste energy incinerator at Wollert. Council's already got a position. Obviously, there won't be able to be a detailed submission in the time frame, but in talking to the director of the area, he thought that given council already had a position, that it would be quite feasible for staff to be able to contribute a submission indicating council's opposition to this incinerator. And my motion's consistent with our position that's already in our waste strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. As seconder, I'll just say thank you for moving this. I think it's important that given the kind of political situation that's happening where it was announced in an area without a democratically elected council and put in a very short deadline for submissions, I'm pleased that this is on the agenda and that council will be contributing to it, and thank the community members who are drawing attention to this. One community member raised it. I think they'd found out just before the Sydney Road Street party, which is about a month ago, and so this has all happened very quickly. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Tapanos.
I just wanted to get some more clarification from the organisation in regards to the submission, because it seems to me that this will need to be prepared tomorrow. And just putting in a submission saying we're opposed, that might be good, fine, but really if submissions are going to be taken seriously, they need to be justified and there needs to be a significant amount of work done. So can we just confirm what work has been done? What kind of submission are we putting in? Are we putting in a submission that is backed up by evidence and data, or are we just saying, yeah, we just don't like this, we're opposed?
So I'll refer that to the Director, Joseph Tobacco.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Indeed, a fair bit of work has previously been undertaken by officers in terms of exploring and developing Council's current waste strategy, which has Council's position on this particular matter articulated. I do acknowledge that there is a very short time frame provided to officers here, but we do have officers mobilised for the best part of tomorrow to consolidate much of Council's existing research and its position on this to ensure that an appropriate submission is made by the closing deadline.
Thank you, Joseph. Do any other councillors wish to contribute to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? I can see that's carried unanimously. I'll declare that carried unanimously. That brings an end to our notices of motion. Next up, we have notices of rescission, but there are none for this meeting. So next up is foreshadowed items. Councillors, do you have any items you'd like to foreshadow that may be a subject of a notice of motion for the next council meeting? We also have no urgent business submitted. We do have a number of confidential items. So at this point, I'll seek a mover to close this meeting to members of the public. Councillor Riley to move, Councillor Pavlidis to second. Thank you to our gallery members. So we'll vote on that first. All those in favour? Yeah, I can see that's passed. So thank you to the members of the gallery. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And councillors will just wait until we've cleared the gallery.